Deandra Dottin retired recently. I know, it probably feels like she's played forever. So if your first thought was, well, good on her, hopefully she makes some coin at the back end of her career, that was pretty much what I thought as well. However, Deandra Dottin is only 31, which means that she's already had a 14-year international career. That's long for, anyone. And on top of a really good batting record and a handy bowling record at times, she's done some other things. In 2010, she made 138 balls against South Africa. Women's cricket was not really at the whole 100 from 38 balls level back then. The runs per over in that year in all T20 cricket was 6.1. And Dottin was only 18. She completely exploded into an era of the game that wasn't really ready for players like her. She just kind of made it that way. And because of that, she was obviously one of the players that helped change the game. And her career went through three obvious eras: amateur, semi-professional, and then the franchise. Which is incredible considering she's still only 31 years old. Those things are supposed to take a very long time. And so at 31, with a career at the top level that's almost gone on for a decade and a half, you could see why she might want to move on. Even if 31 is far closer to peak age than retirement age for most professionals. And it's certainly a huge loss for the West Indies, who've missed out on probably a good couple of years of performances, not to mention her incredible experience.
This is the last knot. My dad told me to say this.
So why has this happened? It seems like a pretty cut and dry case of one of the first times in the women's games that a major player has retired mid-career to cash in on all these new leagues that are around. Especially because it wasn't the only one. South Africa's Lizelle Lee also retired from international cricket. And again, I assumed she was far older than she is. But she's somehow even younger than Dottin. Although Lee's career did start later. But she's still almost been playing for a decade. And in some ways, these retirements only are possible because of franchise cricket. If T20 leagues didn't exist, these women would have stayed. Probably. But when you check out the other sides of their reasons, I think it becomes even more interesting. This is really a story about the entire professional structure of women's cricket, because these stories would have been completely different a decade or so back. Then, women left early to make money outside of cricket. And so the entire thing has changed. It's just got a lot more professional. So was Dottin's retirement letter, which was also a piece of art. It's so formal that she uses the address of Cricket West Indies and also refers to the senior team, in case people thought she might be retiring from, the under-19s. Then she talks about how she's had to overcome so much in her career, which is undoubtedly true of almost all women cricketers. She then adds, though, that the current team is non-conducive to her playing well or wanting to. That's one of those big shots she's known for. She follows that up with a swipe at the team culture and team environment, saying that this is why she hasn't performed of late. Bang, whack. Was the money and franchise culture a part of this? I mean, without doubt. But this feels like she has a deep and personal grudge with someone or something or both when it comes to the West Indies team at the moment. For a blow-by-blow account of this, it's actually worth popping over to the West Indies on 99.94 podcast, who in their own words take this down stanza by stanza. But let's just look at the highlights. It was just sent after midnight UK time on her Twitter, despite the fact that she was in the middle of a tournament. And that isn't the only fun timing. The letter was written long before, and she sent it midway through the Commonwealth Games, where Barbados had beaten Pakistan, which was also Barbados's first win at a Commonwealth Games. And her captain in that team is Hayley Matthews, who, if you don't know, is also the new West Indian women's captain. In fact, if you listen to West Indies on 99.94, Dottin's retirement was written less than a week after that captaincy announcement. Make of that what you will. LinkedIn is part of my online writing course because there are so many cricketers and coaches that are on there. But even outside of that, me and a fellow journalist used to play a game with LinkedIn where we tried to guess what job a former Shield player may have based on their playing style. Surprisingly, we were often wrong. You, however, can use LinkedIn for far more important reasons, like creating a job post in minutes. Add the hashtag hiring and off you go. You can try screening questions to find people with the right skills and experiences, because if you're a small business, well, LinkedIn is a large pond. So don't use this terrific platform to see what Graham Vimpani is up to since he's 100 against the West Indies. Instead, visit linkedin.com/Inca, as in Inca, the back half of my podcast, Red Inca, and you can post a job ad for free. Terms and conditions do apply. So now let's go over to Lizelle Lee and her early exit. Remember, she's only 30 and is a major part of South Africa's golden generation and is now leaving early for franchise cricket. And part of the reason that she has retired from the internationals is that she was afraid she wouldn't be chosen for South Africa because of fitness reasons, which would have led to her not being able to play in those leagues. Now, there's a lot going on here. For one, what is Lee's role? To hit sixes. She has the 4th most in T20Is, despite not having even played 100 matches, and she has the 2nd most in one-day internationals. For what it's worth, Dottin has the most in both. I've been in grounds when Lee has hit big sixes, like the MCG and Grace Road. And I don't mean over the pathetically small women's ropes at times. I mean, she hit the ball well over the fence. And those two grounds must be in the 95th or maybe even the 99th percentile for largest cricket ground. Lizelle Lee is just an incredible hitter of the ball. And there are great conversations to be had about fitness in batting. The less fit you are, the more it affects your concentration and decision making as you get tired earlier. But while that's a really good conversation and is worth having for a lot of players, that's not really Lizelle Lee's job though, is it? You're employing her and paying her and selecting her for South Africa because she hits sixes. And as we see with modern batters, they're getting bigger and stronger. And the trade-off is they'll often be less mobile, of course. Lee's is not a quick runner and certainly not a plus in the field. Neither was Chris Gayle. Fitness should be a big deal in cricket after decades of it being completely overlooked. And as cricket has become more professional, so has fitness. But cricket is also more specialised now. Getting your fast bowler to do the same fitness test as your power hitter makes no sense. The game is changing, and think about the era that Lee came into the game. She entered an amateur sport when none of this mattered. She could just bat and make runs. And in the space of 8 years, she's become more like the future of batting. But she's being penalised for not fitting into the current system, which means past, present and future are all kind of colliding for her. But obviously the most notable thing here is the franchise system is taking over. Remember, most women's teams are either not professional or just barely so. But we already have the 100, the CPL, the Big Bash, perhaps the PSL and IPL to follow, not to mention the Fairbreak International as well. So you suddenly have all these women's leagues available. And so for most of the best T20 women, it makes a lot more sense for you to play as a franchise player than to play for your nation. And we talked about how things have been changing in women's cricket. Dottin was playing for 6 years before we had our first professional national team, England in 2014. The Women's Big Bash starts the year after. We finally got to a point where women international cricketers could make a job out of it, and almost instantly there was a second way for them to earn. It's a bit like that Dottin 100. This came hella fast. We've not even yet seen our first generation of women's cricketers who grew up thinking that this was a career choice that they could make to play cricket professionally. Dottin and Lee's probably both got into the sport for the love of the game. They both first got paid outside their home nations. Dottin wasn't paid at all when she started, and Lee's probably would have had the exact same system. They both probably started to become more professional by playing in things like the Women's Big Bash. That's actually how they've probably made the most of their money so far. And then when they turn 30, suddenly this thing that they always loved is giving them plenty of professional opportunities. It makes sense that they'd want to cash in on those. The women's game is transforming like nothing we have ever seen in cricket. The men had a form of professionalism for 200 years through the county game and even through club cricket in England. Quite a few international players were paid, even if it wasn't what they were worth, and rarely enough to make a career off it. But from around the 1990s, most of the major teams could give you a decent living wage. And from the 2000s, there were central contracts all around the world as well. Not long after that, we had the franchise system. But these things took hundreds of years and sometimes decades to happen. Women's cricket skipped almost all of that. 10 years ago, women were retiring early because they had to start actual careers. Now they are retiring from their national teams because almost instantly they're getting paid more to play in franchise leagues. I mean, these things are happening almost as fast as these two women score. But no matter how you look at all this, having two women retire in their prime is a huge hit for women's international cricket. And so Deandra Dottin and Lizelle Lee will take their big hits and they'll just produce them for franchises.